but we'll see how that one pays out. The warrior here for Bozzzton is going to be kind of this new wave rush warrior. I don't know if you've seen too much of this yet on ladder, Gian.
Not too much on ladder, but I've definitely seen the rumblings of this list among the GM practice groups because it does have the double Stonewall Anchorman in there and the Overlord Sourfang to resurrect not only those, but of course the new card Kresh, Lord of Hurtling, Sourfang, of course, resurrecting any minions with Frenzy and then immediately proccing the Frenzy by dealing damage to them. It's a very powerful combo for that punch in the late game with that Rattlegore on top of it, which we've seen, you know, from other Rush Warriors running N'Zoth instead, but maybe Bozzzton's package is not going to be that powerful in this matchup against Token Druid, where you'd really have that, prefer to have the lower end of the deck.
Right. And here, Warma already deciding upon his mulligan. What do you make of this? Keep him one Lunar Eclipse so he can combo it, I imagine, with that Guess the Weight, but do you like this kind of just... not even a half keep or anything, but just the keep with Gibberling, but without any buffs against Rush Warrior?
Yeah, it's very interesting because it feels like the three cards together don't hit the strongest parts of the deck. But when you look at them as a whole, it kind of ticks the boxes of that's an early game push that Bozzzton won't necessarily have the mana to play Samuro for right away. And it can deal with something like early Parade Leader on curve, which Warma does have to respect, Playmaker as well. And then he's got the less superior card draw in the Guess the Weight compared to Fungal Fortunes, but it still does get quite a lot done. And now he's actually picked up the Lightning Bloom as well, so we could see like the Pride's Fury come down alongside the Gibberling turn in 2 turns time.
Yeah, it's looking pretty good, right? Like I'm even trying to work out if Warma's now just going to change gear and hold to try and have one big turn. The only thing is, it's very scary checking out Bozzzton's opening, right? Is the 1-drop into 2-drop, we can see into choice of 2-drop or 3-drop, depending on what happens. Like, Bozzzton might actually just take control of this game very quickly.
Yeah, and Warma going all the way in the other direction of, I guess, just skipping the Guess the Weight in order to go for Pride's Fury right now. I was saying maybe in 2 turns time if he wanted to get down Guess the Weight, but I think this is a very clever deviation because he did keep Gibberling for this type of pop-off that happens before Samuro, before this type of big Crab Rider push. And it's really difficult for Bozzzton to deal with this many stats, even if Warma can't immediately play Arbor up to buff it. He doesn't need lethal in the next turn, he just needs this persistent 10 damage coming through every single turn.
Yeah, this turn was pretty big though, right? Oh.
You aren't even ready for this.
Bozzzton just saying, yep, okay. I'm just going to play a minion that might get a value trade, or hopefully for him will get a value trade, and try and work through this. And this is what you've got to do, right? If you see this opening from Druid, you kind of do just have to just, even if they're like valuable minions in combos, you have to just play down what you can and hope you can just sort of stem the tide, I guess.
Yeah, as it happens, the Playmaker actually has a very good stat line to deal with Warma's board, and it's not the type of minion that Warma can afford to leave up because any copied Rush minion is too relevant here.
Right.
To the point where Warma drawing any type of mana regeneration to get the hero power through is huge in order to only have to spend 1 Gibberling to get through the Playmaker. Even though he's overloaded again next turn, he still has mana to play Guess the Weight, and Warma's early push was all about just banking off these minions, so the extra Gibberling sticking is a very big deal.
Yeah, and even though these have stuck so far, Bozzzton isn't even like out of it yet. A lot of the times you will lose to a push like this from Druid, but with exactly this weapon trade plus Sword Eater down now, like, it's not perfect, but he's not just dead, which a lot of the time you are.
Pretty good top deck for Warma though in terms of being able to protect his Gibberlings. The Thorngrove Sentries makes it such that Bozzzton is not able to immediately swing. Like, obviously it's painful for Warma to have to take all these value trades, but he's in a position where if it's not Samuro, 2 health versus 4 health doesn't really matter against most of what Bozzzton can play this turn when there are 2 taunts in the way. The Parade Leader is a very good pickup for Bozzzton though, because he can power through both the taunts and then swing down into 1 Gibberling.
Yeah, you get to see the reason why Crab Rider is still in the list, even after a pretty heavy nerf that it had a few weeks back. In that it just being able to have that Wind Fury just initially means that you can just clean up so much of this. Would you finish on Athletics Studies here instead of starting with it just for the reduction?
I do think so. In terms of mana break points, if Bozzzton, has the full 6 mana to work with, a lot of the times the reduction is not relevant, but just so he might have flexibility to play one more card off the top, plus the card that he gets from Athletic Studies. I don't think there's much reason for starting Studies because there's not many things you'd rather play than Crown Rider on this exact board state. Bumper card?
I was even looking at Anchorman. Like, Bozzzton needs cards, right? Maybe at worst, Anchorman hero power next turn is fine. He's almost certainly going to have something to trade it into, draw an additional card, and maybe open up his options. Because although Alex is good, that's many moons away for Bozzzton right now. He's being able to play this Alexstrasza.
No, that's a very good point. Bozzzton just wants to be able to keep the resources flowing because essentially with that powerful start from Warma into Bozzzton having to use a lot of his resources aggressively, it's kind of turned into a top deck war now. And Bozzzton has 2 Anchormans in the natural deck as well because he is running that Saurfang at the top end. So it already has some natural synergy with his cards. But Warma piling on this incremental damage could have something to say about it. Well, I was thinking bumper card at first to give him flexibility in case he top decks something like Anchorman to play this turn, but if you have even one Anchorman, then you're happy, right? So I still do like the pick of the Anchorman for guaranteed card draw, and next turn he can corrupt his stage dive as well and be fully in the driver's seat, whereas Warma really needs Fungal Fortunes to get anything going.
Right, it's like next turn he can just go again, right? Which is fine, and honestly, this is pretty impressive, just the fact that like Bozzzton's managed to stay in this game even with the big opening that Warma had, but I guess Warma was just missing that either second wave or just the arbor up, right?
And Warma did keep that, Guess the Weight as opposed to Fungal Fortunes, and then the Lunar Eclipse all played into the all-in on Gibberling as soon as possible. If you pick up one Lightning Bloom like Warma did into any buff spell, then it's as good as push as any, but there are certain Rush Warrior hands that take advantage of it being Rush Warrior. All of the minions in the deck can very quickly trade into the type of board Warma has built, and we can already see the difference of Pride's Fury compared to something like Savage Roar where Bozzzton would have been dead many turns ago, but instead Bozzzton is just winning after having stabilized.
Is definitely winning after stabilizing right now. That Troublemaker is absolutely huge, and it's getting to the point where there just aren't the cards that'll exist at this point, right, for Warma to do anything about it whatsoever.
I can see.
Yeah, not seeing it. Warma gonna throw it down there. It's a very quick matchup, and again, I am wondering what region I am in. But I think this is only the first taste of the worries that Warma might be having for this Token Druid as a whole, because there's not too much Warlock in his near future that I can see. There is, however, a Mage in Bozzzton's lineup that I could see being the one good matchup for Warma's Token Druid to run into.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, there's pretty much just that, yeah. I mean, I don't know though, because like Rogue can be fine. How do you even feel about Token Druid versus Rogue?
After watching it play out in APAC many times, I do feel that Rogue is actually favored. I started in the same boat as you, where I felt that Druid at least had a slight advantage, but watching Rogue either have the Neophyte start or the Octobot start, it feels like either of those game plans is enough to completely pick apart the Druid, either by delaying their Fungal Fortunes or Glowfly, or just tempoing out a very fast field contact turn, which can dismantle an entire Glowfly board if you get enough brain freezes.
Well, it does look like Bozzzton is going to be locking in his Rogue, which is just pure miracle, right? There's no new cards in that list. It is just the core Rogue with the, I guess, most recent edition of that double Cult Neophyte, which I really feel has just upgraded that Rogue list a tier in its performance. Is just adding those two Cult Neophytes that we saw a few weeks back has increased its win rate in many matchups, but looking at it, it is going to be going up against Warma's Rogue as well, which is pretty much, looks like card for card, the same.
Yeah, this has really just become the standard lineup, the standard build of Miracle Rogue ever since we saw both Viper and Gabby pilot, and Blythe, I think, pilot this exact list all the way to like the top of Masters for Orgrimmar. I guess the one difference being Penflinger over one Og Merchant, but the bread and butter of the deck is very much still intact with the 2 Neophytes, 2 Foxy Frauds, and Vanessa in there. I feel that Neophyte is basically a rogue card at this point. You don't see it played in many other classes, like maybe that 1 week where some people were putting it in Rush Warrior for LHS just to have a harder target against Mage. But it's the fact that Rogue can replay Neophyte many times with Shadow Step. They can get additional value from it paired with a field contact turn that it feels most at home in this deck compared to any other. And it does increase that win rate because you talked about it being strong against Token Druid and also against Mage and Demon Hunter.
Yeah, and what do you think is the key in the Rogue Mirror? Because it's one that can really, it can either go super late or be pretty fast depending on openings, but what are the players really going to be looking for to gain some kind of advantage in the Rogue Mirror?
I think efficient is sufficient here. That's definitely #1 priority. Yes, you would still keep things like Mankrik Kazakus if the curve is offered to you. Foxy Swindle, obviously very strong. But if one player gets to land the Octobot, especially coining it out, it's really tough for the opposing rogue to kill it in one fell swoop. And if it's not killed before turn 5, when the Wicked Stab can then just kill it in one hit, then the opposing rogue can very likely just proc it themselves with Gargant Og Merchant or something of that sort. And then a discounted field contact turn is just really, really difficult to beat if it comes down early. And I feel that the Rogue Mirror is best enjoyed when both players either have the Octobot or neither player has it.
Right, yeah, it's really tough as well because the likelihood, it's not a lot like in the Rogue Mirror you can go, okay, well I just won't proc it. You know, I'll wait, I'll bide my time and let them just have a 1/4 on board, because the sheer likelihood that they have a minion available to them to proc it in one way or another is so high that it does just run away with it. I don't know about you, Gia, but if I was Bozzzton right now, I would be quite happy with my opening hand, yeah?
Oh yeah, I think this is the juice. Foxy Swindle, even though it's not necessarily what you discount with the Octobot, like we could see him coin Octobot, and then if he sees Warma proc it, then you're happy to just keep drawing with the Foxy, and in the more likely outcome where Warma does not proc it, he can play Foxy Swindle after and then discount that hand with the Octobot proc. I think all roads point to coin Octobot though.
Yeah, I mean, there's just almost no reason not to, right? Everything else works even if the Octobot didn't exist, and now it's just everything works that little bit better.
Yeah.
And Warma's just going to do the thing I find myself doing often on ladder, is just saying, right, you can have it on 4 cards, and that's it. And then I just hope there isn't a Shadow Step somewhere.
Yeah. And currently there isn't, and as it happens, the proc on this turn makes it such that Bozzzton actually doesn't have a great way of spending all his mana, so he's gonna wait a little bit more, dagger up. If he gets field contact anytime in the near future, he'll be super rewarded for it. Meanwhile, Warma kept Foxy Fraud as just a turn 2 play. He deviated, of course, because there was an Octobot and there wasn't a good way to get the Foxy value, but the Mankrik comes down as planned, and he can get Foxy Swindle value next turn. Ooh, field contact makes this a bit awkward now for Bozzzton, because I'm pretty sure he just wanted to play Prize Plunderer to deal with Mankrik, which would necessitate 1 more card. He can still go Neophyte and then retain the Og Merchant to go with his field contact. Even if it does take like a dagger swing to get rid of the Mankrik, I think it's well worth it to hold the Og Merchant in hand.
Yeah, I like it. It's just options, right? And the thing is, it's ticking all the boxes here for Bozzzton. He's wide on board, he's got his reduction, his card draw, he's got even more card draw going forward, so why potentially throw that away?
And the effect of the Neophyte can't be understated here. It's preventing Warma from playing second Swindle this turn, which potentially could have given him more resources to deal with a potential Octobot from Bozzzton. And, sorry, field contact. And that is going to be the turn now, even though he doesn't necessarily have that many ways to keep the chain going. It's just more tempo, and he gets to retain Divine Shield on his field contact. It's just so tough for Warma to deal with this early. So many options for Bozzzton to step here. It could be Og Merchant, Cult Neophyte, or Foxy Fraud. Like, the Neophyte gets more disruption in. Og Merchant allows him to put a shield on 1 more minion, make the board even more awkward. And then Foxy lets him get down 1 Thief. So in terms of getting maximum value from field contact, then stepping the Foxy makes the most sense. But I wouldn't hate Bozzzton just going all in with the board and disruption game plan, because he's getting so much chip damage already.
soon.
Oh wow, and there's Jandis as well. Not quite for next turn, of course, being 6 mana, but still just available to keep on the pressure. And Warma just has to go digging. And like, what even for at this point? What is he even looking for here?
I don't know, one thief into like shooting star. It's not even enough to deal with it. And these are certainly not the good options. The Vanessa will give him Cult Neophyte, which is not great. So Warma pretty much knows that he's dead from this point on, but probably just going to do his due diligence, play out a card, and see if there is any way back into the game next turn.
Muzzle their magic.
12 on board plus 1 from the dagger. I think Bozzzton is 1 off right now.
Does Tenwu help him at any point here?
Certainly doesn't need to. Like, honestly, even if he just sends everything face and dagger's face and ends turn, he still wins the next turn, right? Because Warma can't really play around Wicked Stab or Dagger Face.
He could even just like Wicked Stab Brain Freeze this 3-2, right? And just get it gone and then just carry on.
Yeah,
Seems
I think
fine.
it's all fine. I guess in terms of optimization, you could think about, oh, what if they generate Ice Barrier? So, like, for Bozzzton, like, the better thing to do, quote-unquote, is just play Cult Neophyte. But, but he is winning so hard that it really does not matter.
He's winning so much, he can just play green cards and it'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. What about yellow cards, Raven? Because they're combo.
They're often okay as well. They do get the job done, I've heard. And this has just been one of those games, right? Bozzzton had such a sick opening and Warma just never really had the juice to get going with those double secret passage. I feel like Warma's spells have been increased by 1 all game as well. It's just turn after turn he's paying like, in a lot of cases, like double the mana cost. And there's the concede from Warma. Bozzzton already goes up 2-0 in this series in very convincing fashion so far.
What a brisk pace we have here in Europe today. I think, well, we did mention at the start, right? You're back! I love it!
I'm not gonna lie, I was like trying to solve tech issues and troubleshooting stuff whilst casting, so if I sounded rubbish, that was why. But yeah, sorry, you were saying Bozzzton 2-0.
Yeah, no worries. Just happy to see that I am not casting next to a flat picture because that would be, you know, kind of awkward as it already has been. But yes, we were talking about at the beginning of the matchup, you asked me what the key to it really is. And in this game, as we just saw in APAC a while ago, is Octobot. Like, you talked about how Warma's spells cost +1 the entire game. Bozzzton's cards cost -1 the entire game because of this Octobot. It just allows for such broken things to happen. And that's why I say the Rogue Mirror is best enjoyed with both players having Octobot or neither, because otherwise it ends up so one-sided.
Well, the combination as well, because, I mean, I'm not going to do it, but if someone decided to count the mana saved on Bozzzton's side and then the mana increase total on Warma's, the difference would be absolutely huge, probably close to a flow. So yeah, really, really big deal here for Bozzzton, just 2-0 up so far, and now he only has his Mage to get a win with, but I do want to hear your opinion on Mage now, because I feel like it was sort of teetering out the past couple of weeks, and now we've had the mini set, which I think it's fair to say, at least for now, Mage has not really benefited from in any visible way. So what do you think about even bringing Mage to this playoffs?
I don't know, Raven. I just think Mage is really weak now, and that's coming from somebody that really, really loved the deck when it was at its peak with the Refreshing Spring Water at 4. Sorry, talking about non-Lunacy Mage. I think the players that do bring Mage still do very much believe in the power of Lunacy, because I think the base deck has very, very few good matchups. I will say that Control Warrior is one of those good matchups, though, because while the Warrior does have access to a lot of armor gain, it's kind of conditional on there being small minions to actually kill off with Rancor a lot of the time, which Mage is not necessarily going to play. And then Mask of Cthulhu has that very powerful interplay against Bulwark of Azeroth. So I feel like the base deck from Bozzzton will have a better matchup against Control Warrior compared to any Lunacy shenanigans.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, although Control Warrior is a very defensive deck, and you think, oh, it can outlast burn damage, it like needs things to be able to do that, right? And if it is just relentless burn, it's one of the reasons why, like, in a weird way, like Face Hunter can be a good matchup for the Hunter against Control Warrior with certain builds, because they just don't really have ways to interact with the board in the right way. So Bozzzton will probably be looking for that lunacy though, because we've seen, especially in EU, I'm not sure about the other regions 100%, but we've seen a lot of players shift from the non-lunacy straight into lunacy, and then almost just playing it every single game possible, even if they have like elements of a burn plan already in hand.
You asked for it.
I do wonder. One thing I know from EU is that everybody gets flow, and that has stayed true to form.
Yep.
I'm not surprised by it anymore. I guess I should just stop calling it out entirely.
Well, Sol was correct. Was it last week when you covered the first match for me that day, and you just said, like, we don't even mention it anymore because it just happens so often that it's just expected. And like you said, Bozzzton already got it in his opening hand.
Yeah. You did say that you expect him to go lunacy if he gets it. Unfortunately, it looks like we won't be able to answer that question, but I strongly believe that the lunacy game plan is weaker against Warrior on average, because just the base deck from Mage makes a lot of the cards that Warrior likes to run useless, right? Okay, we get to answer the question.
Yep.
But the fact that Mage is running all this burst that doesn't necessarily need the board to get online is making Outrider's Axe very hard for Warrior to use, which is a key card to make sure they actually get to a lot of their powerful tools to fight back and the ways to gain armor. And so I definitely feel like just Encanter's flow and then skip the lunacy is the way I would approach the matchup, but we'll see how Bozzzton thinks about it, because if he is going to go lunacy, I definitely think the flow should come after.
Oh yeah, lunacy all the way, hero power, coin lunacy flow. I knew it, and this is it. I'm not even saying it's 100% correct. It's just been interesting to watch from my side, where we're seeing just the evolution of how to play these cards just change as not only the deck's been nerfed, but also the meta's changed, because obviously at the start of this meta, no one was playing Control Warrior, so it was less of a thing to even think about, right?
Yeah. Small shake of the head from Bozzzton there, because he drew the Flame Strike prior to Lunacy, which is one of the cards he would want to transform into Grand Slam. Now, if you told me that the Lunacy would get you 3 Grand Slams every single time, then yes, I'd be on board for that game plan against Control Warrior. But the average outcome of like some minion developing boards, I feel like that might give Warma things he actually wants to do with the Outrider's Axe and his brawls that might be stranded otherwise against the burn game plan. But we'll see. First draw from Bozzzton is not particularly effective against Control Warrior, but maybe just useful to get rid of this buffed Kargath Prime. Oh.
Yeah, that's some nice card draw for Bozzzton. One thing that's important to note, there's been a change from previous versions of Warma Control Warrior, is he isn't playing South Sea Scoundrels in this list because he is banning Priest, as we've seen already with a double Priest ban this match. And although that makes total sense, don't get me wrong, one of the benefits I saw from Control Warrior previously was it can actually just beat people up with the right curve, right? And you saw that right then, Bozzzton going for Twisting Nether and for going that Skull for now, when there was potential other options. But most importantly, if there's South Sea as well, it's just an additional 5/5 on board, and it has very funny interactions with Deck of Lunacy.
It really does. I mean, you can tell from Warma's expression that he's been having bad beats all series long. Lunacy getting a Pexus Blast is kind of unfair, because I feel like when you play Lunacy, you're kind of saying, I'm giving up on the good cards in my deck. But Bozzzton gets to have his cake and eat it. Double Apexis Blast available here. One to kill off the Scorpion, you'd have to imagine. And the Skull, even though it's kind of difficult to outcast, he just played 2 mana, draw 3. That's like a Fungal Fortune. So that's really good. Pre-nerf.
Yeah, that is pretty good. What wasn't, though, were the outcomes from this Apexis Blast. And although, you know, the taunt could be okay in some matchups, definitely not in this one. These minions for Bozzzton, I think, really needed to be either just threats themselves or the one, you know, Death Rattle minions, anything sticky and annoying. But a 1/8 and a 3/3 isn't going to be the end of the world here for Warma.
Yeah, it's also not the end of the world for Bozzzton, though. He just has Skull, Arcane Intellect.
Sure.
And for Warma, the taunt is still kind of annoying because he can't just straight up Outriders Axe the Faceless, and he really wants to get that card draw rolling in order to make sure he has the resources to keep up with whatever Bozzzton has generated in his deck by this point. And so we could see just pre-equip the Outriders, and then I don't know if he softens the 1/8 and then maybe deals with it the next turn. But there's also this Bozzzton to consider, which at any point is just kind of a sap built into the body, right? Because Bozzzton has no natural minions.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Because even, I'm not saying it was the best play now, but even if Bozzzton just bounced this taunt, it would be okay, because if your opponents played Lunacy Flow and then they pay 5 out of 7 mana to play a rush minion with taunt, you'd probably be okay with that turn a lot of the time. So we'll have to see how Bozzzton factors in the future. But Bozzzton getting one of the new cards there, Party Up. I know one of Sottle's favourite cards from the new set is a pretty big deal, actually. Whether it gets Death Rattle, Lifesteal, Poison, something like that, could be pretty powerful.
It does, however, interact very poorly with Rancor, and a lot of the time gives Warma armor that he would not have had access to in the first place. But there's a chance for these adventurers to have Divine Shield, right? Which is both a disruption for Rancor and Bladestorm, and it's also just Bozzzton's best development at this point, so I wouldn't mind him just slamming it down here. The rest of Bozzzton's generations from the Lunacy have been middling, though, because there's a lot of card draw, but the card draw is only good if he gets actual value from his deck, and we'll see. That's a whiff. Commencement's a whiff. Okay, another Apexis is good, but Idol is a whiff. Second Brawl is a whiff. I'm worried about Bozzzton's overall value potential.
Yeah, this is the problem. Normally, card draw you're very happy with because it's very cheap a lot of the time, right? But in this matchup, card draw is just going to get him to fatigue fast at this point, so it's not really going to do what he wants it to do.
Does get a real 5-drop outcome this time, though, off the Gubarashi. There's the Rancor. I don't think Warma will be playing it in the near future. We could just see Bozzzton to bounce the Gubarashi back. But first things first, get that card draw rolling. Ooh, he can eat the Gubarashi! Eating goobers.
Yeah, it pains me that that's become canon now, that it's just Gubarashi.
Yes, it is.
But, you know, I've accepted it. That is important, though, because this sort of circles back to what I was saying earlier, where Bozzzton won't want to be playing a 5-drop from hand with a deck of Lunacy Flow deck, right? Like, he won't want to be spending this much mana on a single minion when he's only got 8. So I think it's pretty likely that this Mutinous actually gets some payoff here for Warma.
That is true. Although Bozzzton does have to dump some of these other cards if he's not playing Gurbashi, and he does have a lot of options, right? The Party Up, just to make room for Skull to eventually get something done. The whole idea with Lunacy is that you do have a lot of additional threats generated in the deck, and even though that does play into poorly what the Control Warrior wants to do, which is play their Brawls and Bladestorms, if you can play them all fast enough, then the Warrior won't necessarily have had the time to draw all of their removal, and then that can get over the line. So Bozzzton prioritizing development here with the Party Up, just praying that there's no Rancor, but Warma will be very delighted to see that he's not eating like a Gubarashi with his Mutinous this turn, but instead he's eating a bunch of tiny 2/2s and getting value off of his Outrider's Axe Swing.
Yeah, and you know this is painful. Bozzzton just keeps playing spells that do nothing to get them out of his hand. It's literally spend X mana and do nothing.
The important thing to note is that Bozzzton still has 2 of the 10-cost spells in his deck, which will be 6 cost at this point, like to actually play, but those could be Grand Slams, and that's really the kicker that Bozzzton is looking for here. And even if he does hit them, Warma has access to Brawl now. Okay, Vivid Spores plus Grand Slam, if he gets it, is very powerful though. I don't feel like outcasting the Skull actually has that much added value because Bozzzton has plenty of mana to play with, and his cards are all dirt cheap at this point.
Yeah. I'm just trying to work out whether having one... I mean, I guess Vivid Spores is 0 anyway, right? I'm trying to work out whether Bozzzton can just play Flame Strike, have one really bad turn, just for like an insane turn the one after. But I'm kind of with you. I don't think it matters outcasting it that much.
Like, sometimes you might be able to outcast exactly Grand Slam if you want to play both of them on the same turn, but then you don't even get all the Rhinos, or say Grand Slam and Survival of the Fittest. But I also don't feel like that's particularly powerful because they attack before you buff them. But Bozzzton is just going to go ahead and get the discounts here. Rally, not great. Okay,
there's
one of the 10 costs. That's a whiff though.
So he's going to just chuck Rally.
Yeah.
And
Or that's the good one though. The Divine Shield is the one that doesn't straight up die to the axe. However, Warma can take this turn to happily chomp up the Gurabashi, you'd have to imagine, because he knows it's in hand and there might not be any more minions from this point.
Yep. I don't know how much you've played this card yet, but this always gets me because when you play it, at least I found, in your view, it hits the board and then for like a second, nothing happens and then it eats a minion. and I always think like, oh, I've done it again where there's no minions in hand. But no, it does get there eventually. Here, though, there is the turn that Bozzdton's probably all in on in this game, which is the Nagran Slam Vivid.
Oh, but it's so awkward because now there's this Mutinous in the way, which, you know, half the time you lose 2 of your Rhinos immediately into the Mutinous. So the Vivid Spores looks a lot worse as well, but there's just not a great way to kill it off.
Well, yeah, right. He can Runic Carving, don't rush, and then just Brawl, and then Nagran Slam Vivid.
He could, but is that worth it? It's like you're giving up the Runic Carvings, which is a board itself. Like, I think if he's playing the Runic, he might just call that a board and force Warma to Brawl it or Bladestorm it, etc.
Yeah, I guess. It's just tough, right? Because at this point, with Warma having this much armor and a 6/12, will he care about a board of 2/2s?
Maybe not. So Bozzdton is passing entirely, trying to get Warma to play any additional minion, and then he can take, at worst, a 50-50 Brawl. And I guess that's as good a chance as any for Bozzdton, but I really don't see him getting there, even if he gets the other 10-cost spell to be in a Grand Slam. And Warma here, thinking, is there any reason for him to play the Shield Maiden? I think this is a very intelligent patience to have, because like there's no reason to develop more if Bozzdton is not doing anything in the first place, right? Warma is winning here. It's not parity. He's just pushing 6 damage every single turn.
Right.
Okay, there's the clear though.
Yeah, and just
Now.
and like you said, just good heads up play there from Warma, because if that continues, he just wins the game. So why not make it continue? Nagran Slam is going to come down here with that Vivid Spores. So finally, Bozzdton gets his big push, and I guess just about now really getting the big payoff for that Lunacy.
Yeah, this is really the only turn where it's come in really clutch, and Warma can deal with this. Bladestorm into Brawl or Bladestorm into Barrow of Shield Slam. There's a lot of different ways. I'm not sure how he values the resources, like, because the biggest threat to Warma is just second to Grand Slam at this point, in which case they're kind of the same, which ones to hold in hand. So I kind of value using the Brawl instead as the more expensive card, but you might say maybe Bladestorm, it's not always going to be a symmetrical board of health that Bozzdton builds, so he can use Bladestorm here instead.
Right, yeah, because he's seen the Flame Strike, he knows that there's like one chance now of it being another Nagrand, right? So I think I like Bladestorm just for how clean this is.
And the Barrow of Hero Power Shield Slam gonna clean this up nice and tidy, very nice, and Warma gets to fit in a swing as well. Actually, he doesn't even need to Shield Slam his Barrow, right? I think he's fine to take another 9 damage if he's at full 30, and then the Barrow by itself can threaten the clear.
Well, now he could just Rancor.
Or even Minefield.
Because what yeah, sure, Minefield would be fine. Because what I was thinking was, if another Nagrand Slam happens, he even just has Shield Maiden, Armor, Shield Slam, right?
Yeah.
To just deal with 2 of them. And then can he just deal with the rest, right? He has Brawl as well. Like, here is, though, the second Nagrand Slam has come down, and that's probably Bozzdton's last push.
Yeah. Definitely feels like it. It's also the best possible timing because Bozzdton has just seen a bunch of resources used. But the Brawl here to sweep up, and then like Minefield or Shield Slam plus Swing to deal with the remaining Cleft Hoof is gonna seal it here, unless Bozzdton has some miracles in these last 4 cards. Kinda doubt it though.
Yeah. I mean, Lunacy does some pretty crazy things, but I'm not sure what could possibly be left for Bozzdton to even make an impact. Dire Frenzy! Too little, too late. How sick would have that been if you drew it last time?
That would have been pretty fun. Just play a big guy every single turn, a big Cleft Hoof.
Well, and he has Idol of Yashaj, right? So
yeah,
he could have just made a 10-10.
But alas, it was not meant to be. The runic carvings are not beasts. I do think Bozzzton ends up playing them for 2-2s here. He has seen double Rancor, to be fair, because he's just not winning if he doesn't stick any board from this point. And it's so easy for Warma. You know, this even gets more draws with the swing and just Blade Storm. He honestly doesn't even need to play it. I favor him swinging first and then evaluating off the card draw.
Yeah, the most, if he wants, he can just take 2, right, to draw a card. That's fine. And honestly, depending on what he draws, I could just see him just leaving them up if he really wanted to. I don't think it would change the outcome of the game at this point. He is going to be, I guess, ultra safe is the way to put it here, with just clearing them up, playing Shield Maiden, and just saying, well, he's held like, what, 3-4 cards for most of the game now and not played them. They must be trash.
Yeah, fair enough. I think there's honestly nothing that Warma really even wants to draw at this point, because he's gotten like both the Rancors and the Blade Storms. There's really just one more Brawl in there in terms of removal. And in terms of like proactive threats, I don't think Warma will play if he can help it, because we saw that like very interesting game of Alan versus Bankyugi over in APAC, where Alan was hoping and praying for Bankyugi to play a Rattlegore at any point so he could initiate it off of his lunacy and copy it. And if that out doesn't exist, and you know, Bozzzton has no win condition and Warma has no reason to try and race Bozzzton because he's simply winning in fatigue.
And it's one of those sort of deeper levels of Hearthstone that you learn once you start getting better at the game, is just when to really know you're winning and know that you don't have to do anything to win, right? You can just keep continuing with the status quo, I guess.
Absolutely. And Warma not even like slightly punished at all by not taking the swing, because he's drawn the natural brawl anyway. Jewel of N'Zoth is an absolute whiff here for Bozzzton.
Is there anything he's made that is death rattled? I don't think so, right?
He has like manually put Death Rattle on the Cleft Hoofs with the Vivid Spells, but those are not Death Rattle minions, and so
I think there's actually nothing.
Yeah, I don't think there's any adventure with Death Rattle, so that's it. Bozzzton's damage is just pings and Mask of Cthulhu, which never gets there against the repeated armor game from Warma.
It's always worth to try, though. Just play Jewel of N'Zoth in case you forgot. You know, sometimes things just slip your mind, so just play it out. Hope that there was some mystery card like Astromancer Solarian just knocking around somehow. And go for it. But I think Bozzzton will pretty quickly realize, that Warma is not going to let her, basically interact with Bozzzton for the rest of the game. He's just going to end this one out. And Warma starts to fight back. The Control Warrior getting the job done. But again, it is interesting to wind back all the way to the start of that game, where you just have to ask the question, on paper, is Lunacy correct versus Warrior, yes or no? I don't know the answer, but it'll be interesting to replay the game out if he just went with just the flow plan.
Absolutely. I mean, it's difficult to answer anything on paper when it comes to Lunacy, because there is so much variance with the outcomes here. I think Bozzzton maybe would have gotten like a below average Lunacy in terms of having double Brawl Hysteria, 2 dead card, 3 dead, 4 of them with the Dark Portal, Idol of Yasharaj Commencement, and the Jewel of N'Zoth, all of them just completely zero value. However, he did get the better outcomes from the 10-cost spells of the double Grand Slam and the Vivid Spores. So I feel like even with a little bit more value, Warma still could have gotten there, because he was sat on double Shield Slam and Brawl, just extra, not needed there. And it's also not trying to say that, my line would have won 100% of the time, but just off of experience, I feel that Warrior gets stranded with a lot of those removal cards if the Mage just goes for repeated Fireballs, Ruined Orbs, and tries to get Imprisoned Phoenix and goes for a very powerful burn game plan towards the late game. That's just my opinion, though, and we might get to see more of the matchup a bit later on.
Yeah, I do think it is interesting, though, right? Because Warrior's one weakness now is its card draw isn't always there, especially if you don't give it targets for that Outrider's Axe. So maybe that's the way you do get around it. I'm with you on that. Yeah, it does look like, of course, Bozzzton will be playing his Mage once again, and it is going to be going up against... Oh, I'm not sure yet. Never mind. Oh, there you go. The Rogue of Warma. So again, they're one of the, I guess, trademark matchups of this meta, I think. The Spell Mage versus the Miracle Rogue, I think, is a super standard one, but one that is, at least to me, flipped on its head a little bit, whereas I think Rogue is more than happy to play this matchup now.
Absolutely. I've, played this on both sides on ladder quite a bit after the nerf to refreshing spring water, and it's already just gotten to the point where I feel like the mage is heavily unfavored. It was already not the easiest, even pre-nerf, but now with that more expensive refreshing spring water, it's one turn later before mage is able to really get lots of value off of Encounter Slow, if they draw it in the first place, mind you, but because we're in Europe, I'm just assuming every mage starts with low, and even then, I'm saying the rogue is favored because they have strong ways to get on board in the early game, and then that burst towards the late game that's tough for mage to play around, right? The double Wicked Stabs and Alexstrasza.
Yeah. And that's it, like both of these decks suffer from the same thing, that when damage is done, it's done. So outside of Alexstrasza's, of course, healing, it's pretty permanent. So looking at Warma's opening hand as well, he has a ton of stuff to do and gets to start with just a fairly strong curve opening of this Neophyte into Mankrik, and then can plan to go off with this field contact, especially if he gets hold of an Octo at some point in the near future. But Warma actually has a lot of tools himself too right now. Ooh.
Yeah, Bozzzton picked up, okay, that draw is very good. I was going to say even his first Font of Power was fine just for Water Elemental this turn. Obviously, the Apexis is premium, so he can both get rid of the Mankrik and get something powerful on board. But the Sage could be clutch a bit later if he gets a Ring Toss activated. The card draw can sometimes fall a bit dry for Mage. But oh my goodness, that is a really good 5-drop to get as well.
Yeah, that's just big. Like 6 health is a big ask, honestly, even against Rogue. Important to note as well, Bozzzton is only playing 1 ring toss. That's something we've seen cut down quite commonly if players are going to cut here and there for Mage. This Firebrand
is able to clear this with the Prize Plunder, but yeah, the Firebrand, I just reacted to that and the Wormweaver because they're both great ways to get on board and sweep up board against Rogue. But it turns out Bozzzton doesn't actually have any cheap spells to play with him at the moment. That's not one he wants to just throw out either. So even if it's like Ping Firebrand or just Water Elemental, I think that's stronger. We could see like potentially even 2 minions here, just Solarian and Firebrand.
Yeah, it's really tough with Firebrand and Devolving Missiles. It's really hard to want to play the minion. So I was even looking at, I know it's not spending the mana, but just like double Solarian here. He's already played 1 Apexis Blast anyway, so he's not going to get overly punished. He's played double Font. Like, I think double Solarian, it puts 2 threats on board for Warma. I don't think you can ignore like +2 spell damage.
Yeah.
And then have the Firebrand to back it up with Devolving Missiles. But Bozzzton has just gone for the one big chunky minion of the Water Elemental.
Yeah, I think this was my first instinct. Not to say that the Solarians are necessarily bad to put the primes in your deck, because you did outline all the reasons why it's not as detrimental at this point. But it's just like this health line on them is just too fragile to die to what you already know is a step field contact turn. The only awkwardness is leaving up Prize Plunder, which it can be shadow stepped if you are going to play this high health minion. So a lot of the times the Water Elemental is dead on arrival. And it looks like that is going to be almost the case here. 5 cards played, right? I
think to be fair, Bozzzton probably expects this turn to not be very nice for him, but he has a good follow-up, so it's just play whatever's the most awkward minion to get out of the hand.
Warma just going to soften the Water Elemental as much as possible and fix up the Off Merchant, so it's all fine. That's huge, because I think Bozzzton was looking to trade that away and then go for like a combustion with the Firebrand clear. Now the Firebrand combustion is actually still a full clear. My bad. He just targets the 1 thief.
Yeah, if he hits the 1 thief, then it kills the 2 health minions as well, and then 4 health left on board, 4 damage from Firebrand. Makes sense to me, and that's it, right? Bozzzton just knew the big turn was coming from Warma, but he very often had an answer to that, and now Warma's kind of got to do it all over again, and Bozzzton's suddenly getting into his, Mask territory, Flame Strike we can see in hand, but also just dumping a ton of minions on board himself as well.
Right. In these types of turns approaching Mask territory, if Rogue has not very convincingly seized the board versus Mage, then it starts to get scary. However, Warma is sitting on what will later be 12 damage of his own, and he gets to discount quite a bit of it, so it's already looking like not a runaway for Bozzzton, especially since Warma's fit in this counter spell as well, which prevents Just Mask from coming down this turn. Whew.
Bozzzton does have this devolve into test as well, which
Yeah.
is pretty nice.
Not often I suggest devolving to test rather than the card that you want to get through cleanly, but yeah, I don't think this board is high priority to devolve. Honestly, Bozzzton just wants more spells played so he can immediately buff his mana worms.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering if in a weird way, Bozzzton ever like tests with Deck of Lunacy? Is that crazy at this point? It probably is. Just because then, if it's Netherwind, then he can devolve afterwards, right? So it like still has an impact on the board.
Yeah, I do think he might test with Flow instead, so he has that mana left over to ping. Because a lot of the time, if it is Netherwind, you'd rather ping the Prize Plunderer and then narrow the board. So
That's true.
Devolving can get rid of the 4-cost minion. I don't think the Flow is overly relevant at this point with no card draw for Bozzzton. He has plenty of things to do with his hand at the moment, but he is going to start devolving missiles, and that means that against Counterspell, this is obviously better than Netherwind Portal.
Yeah. And this is a danger moment here for Warma, because every single time I faced this kind of board on ladder and thought, oh, I can survive one turn versus the mana worms, what's the worst that could happen? I die. So even though these are 1-2s now, not like the olden days when they were much stronger, they are still threats and ones that cannot be ignored. Warma is going to go Secret Passage, go fishing for something a little bit more powerful here.
And doesn't hit Pride Splendor or Brain Freeze, but does get Kazakus, which is decent. I think the 1-cost Golem is not strong enough here. I think he might have to take the pain for one turn against the Mana Worms and just get a 5-cost for next turn, but he disagrees. Looking for Shoot and Rush, you'd have to, or Shoot and Poison, you'd have to imagine, but misses.
Ugh. Did you take card draw instead? Yeah, okay. Yeah. If all else fails and you're playing Rogue, just take card draw, it'll be fine.
It'll be fine, yeah. I mean, from Warma's perspective, he could just be very dead next turn, right? 2 Flows played, if there's a single Refreshing Spring Water and both the Mana Worms stick, then that's basically infinite damage. But Warma's saving grace is that Bozzzton currently doesn't have any card draw. It's really just the Mask that's a threatening card at this point.
And he will know that 2 of the cards, well, he'll know 5 of the cards aren't reduced, right? Because 3 are minions and 2 are spells that he had in hand before. I think he's right.
Yeah, that's right. For Bozzzton, I think because he can only really play 1 impactful spell here, I don't think he wants the Lunacy after having played 2 Flows. I would favor just a Pexus Blast. And then even with the Solarians played to push more face damage. But the Sage is 1 card draw to be fair.
Okay. He can Ruined Orb ping now on the Kazakus.
I think I'd favor Solarian Ruined Orb by that point.
Sure.
I don't think he's bothered about the primes being in his deck, but Bozzzton disagrees. Fireball, sign me up.
Time runs out on me.
Unless he's thinking Flow. Just to play it this just to play it this turn.
That'd be funny.
It's that is reduce the cost of your deck by 1 additional and deal 2 to face. That's a good card.
It is, but then the Kazaka stays up, and then he would have to trade a Mana Worm to get rid of it. But yeah, I think the burn is just a little bit too good to pass up by this point. Warma, with the field contact, is kind of given a second hope just by the virtue of there only being 1 spell played last turn. But I wonder if it's going to be good enough.
Okay, well, Man Creek, not a bad pull. But this is, I guess, the only thing that keeps Rogue in check, even if you can say it's in check at all, is that although it draws its deck quickly, it does have limited resources, right? You don't generate just endless stuff. So if you can't kill your opponent in that set, you probably lose at that point. You can actually just kind of fatigue a Rogue pretty easily, so we'll see if that's the plan for Bozzzton here.
The point where Warma is brain freezing his own Octobot so he can fit in a Ruined Orb and like still have that mana banked for next turn to go for Alex and Wicked Stab, you'd have to imagine. on the off chance that he's alive, because it feels like he's leaving up 10 damage, and one of those minions is a Mana Worm next turn. Right, 12 damage. Does get the Neophyte in though, so limiting what Bozzzton can do, but he can still do a lot.
Oh.
I think this is just lethal, has to be, right? I didn't count, but it's
Yeah, it is.
11
Yep,
phase,
I just counted.
3 spells, yeah.
I went 1, 2, 5, 10 lethal is how I counted at that point. Because the Mana Worms get so much strong. And this is what I mean, you just can't leave them alive, because even this sort of lessened turn by Bozzzton, it wasn't exactly a pop-off turn, right? Like, you know, he's still more than good enough to make up the damage, and that means Viper takes a loss in this first match of the day. Bozzzton takes the victory, and he is going to be going on to face Yala in the winners match of this group.
Went by in the blink of an eye. Honestly, like, those Mana Worms did live for a turn and he didn't immediately die, but just the fact that Warma was kind of forced on using the Prize Plunderer super early this turn, and this turn from Bozzzton, where he cleared up that huge board development and got back on board ahead with the Firebrand, was what really made things impossible for Warma to swing, because Rogue really relies on that incremental damage in the early game to be able to get over the line at the end with the fireballs there, and we saw that Bozzzton managed to get the job done first. Double flow still has its power. I think that's my mistake here. I'm assuming they only draw 1 flow. 2 flows is the way to beat Rogue.
Yep, that's the general way here in the European region, but